What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I want to talk about your 2025 rookie picks because I think we're in this really interesting spot of the offseason where those 2025 draft picks are at a potential all-time high in value. We're a few weeks away from the NFL draft, so the excitement is really building for this class, but we still don't know, the landing spots, the exact draft capital, and I think at this point in the offseason, people tend to be overly optimistic about those rookie picks and this class. Everyone's looking at the fun landing spots, how early guys could potentially go. And I just think there's not as much thought into some of the negatives, how maybe some of, the draft capital, the landing spots could go poorly. And so I do think this is an interesting window to potentially move off of your rookie picks in favor of some, more proven, established options. So I'm going to be talking about all the first round rookie picks and then just giving some potential targets that I'd be looking at if you are trying to move off of those picks. Let me hear your thoughts down below. If you enjoy the video, hit that like button and subscribe. But we're going to start off here with the 101. And this isn't really a year where there's going to be a lot of variance for the number one pick. I mean, probably like 99% of drafts, barring something extreme happening, within the next few weeks, Ashton Jeanty is going to be the 101. So you're pretty much looking at like, who would you be acquiring if you're trading away the 101, which is going to be Ashton Jeanty. And just some names to throw out there. I would take Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs. I think Jeanty right now would be my running back 3 in Dynasty. But if you can get, the two guys who have established themselves as high-end fantasy running back ones, still very young, I would take them over like the uncertainty and like 1 to 2 year age difference with Ashton Jeanty. So if you can get one of those top 2 running backs, I'd obviously go for it. And then looking at some wide receivers, I think Brian Thomas Jr., Puka Nacua would be willing to take either of those guys. Just proven, young wide receivers who I think are going to have that high-end wide receiver 1 upside. We've already seen it from Puka. BTJ was definitely in there, towards the back half of the season. So those are like the 4 names I'd throw out there. I'm not really like urgently trying to trade away the 101 with Ashton Jeanty, but if you would rather, lock up one of those established guys, someone super high on Jeanty, I think it could make sense to move off of him. Now the 102, I think this is where it gets interesting. And I do think if I had the 102, I would definitely be willing to move it because there's just not a lot of consensus right now when it comes to this pick. So as you can see on the screen, these are kind of like the general areas where these players are going. So at the 102, you're probably going to be looking at, Amarion Hampton, Cam Ward, Ted McMillan, Travion Henderson. Like those are most likely the names that are going to be in consideration. And so some of the targets that I'd be looking at are Devon Achane and Drake London. For Devon Achane here, right, if you're comparing him to like an Amarion Hampton or a Travion Henderson, for Achane, you're getting a young running back who is still only 23 years old. He has put up 17 plus point per game seasons in back-to-back years. Last year, if you just look at the games where Tua was healthy, the dude was averaging 22.6 PPR points per game, and he's kind of won both seasons in different ways. As a rookie, he was just ultra efficient, was hitting with a ton of big play upside. Year 2, he had that elite receiving upside. So I pretty much know what I'm getting in Achane. He's someone back-to-back years, running back 1. I think he does have that high-end RB1 upside. And so like you could take a swing on a Hampton or a Henderson, but I don't know if you guys have seen that meme where it's like, this rookie pick could be anything. It could even be like this player. And it's like, if Hampton and Henderson did what Achane did in their first 2 years, I think you would view that as a huge win. I think you take a lot of the uncertainty out of it, and bringing on Devon Achane could be interesting. And then also for Drake London here, he took a big year 3 leap, 16.5 points per game, was the wide receiver 13 in points per game. Still only 23 years old. He's just a proven hit that I think is going to be viewed as like probably at worst a back-end wide receiver 1 moving forward. So if I can move off that 102 spot for Achane or London, I would love to do it. Now looking at the 103 here, I've got a quarterback and a wide receiver, kind of looking at the same targets in this area, Hampton, Ward, McMillan, Henderson. Obviously not going to be perfect. There's going to be variance draft to draft, but overall, that's kind of like the bucket of players. So I think Kyler Murray and Ladd McConkey are both interesting options. For Kyler Murray, you're just looking at a proven NFL quarterback who's also flashed fantasy upside. In his 6 NFL seasons, he has been a top 12 quarterback in points per game in all 6 of them. He also has some higher upside finishes where he has been the quarterback 3 and the quarterback 4. He has a strong group of weapons moving forward. They just extended Trey McBride. Obviously, you have Marvin Harrison Jr. there on the rookie deal. And then he's 27 years old. So if you're someone who's considering like a Cam Ward in like the 102, 103 spot, Personally, I would much rather take on Kyler. Like, he's good enough to stay in the league as a starting quarterback. And I also think just with his rushing upside, I think he does have a way higher ceiling than a guy like Cam Ward. So instead of, making the Cam Ward pick or even some of these other guys, I'd be totally cool adding Kyler to my quarterback room. And then for Ladd McConkey, he was the wide receiver 16 in points per game last year as a rookie. Really broke out in his last 7 games, averaged 18.7 points per game. He's 23 years old. He's going to be attached to Justin Herbert for the foreseeable future. And I do think he has a great shot to be a top 12 wide receiver in the 2025 season. And so if I can get Ladd, who's a potential wide receiver 1 heading into year 2, I'm definitely taking him over like a random shot at Ted McMillan. I'm taking him over a quarterback option like Cam Ward. Maybe you make the case that like Hampton gets amazing draft capital. Henderson also sneaks into round 1, and then maybe it's a conversation. But I think things have to go really right for this to even be like a close call. Because if this is a decision between Cam Ward, Ted McMillan, like a round 2 Henderson, I'd feel pretty confident just locking in, the proven asset in a Ladd McConkey. Now, looking at the 104, adding some potential names to like the rookies you could be looking at here, this could be a Tyler Warren. I do think it would be a reach, but maybe someone really likes him. I also think you're kind of getting, Quinshon Judkins in the mix. Probably not looking at Hampton in this range in the vast majority of leagues. And so some potential targets I have here are JSN and Marvin Harrison Jr. For JSN, he was the wide receiver 17 last year, really broke out over the second half, similar to Ladd McConkey, 18.2 points per game in his last 9 games. And I think you could kind of buy low here on him just having like a very weird offseason where the Seahawks just made a ton of changes. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett are gone. You bring in Cooper Kupp, which is kind of a clunky fit, but still a believer in the talent of JSN. Coaching staff has been, moved around, offensive coordinator. You have Geno Smith gone, Sam Darnold coming in. So a lot has happened, but the fact that JSN broke out last year, I still think he's a very talented player. Like, all that stuff still stands true here. And so I'm still very high on JSN. And once again, like, I'm taking him over the randomness of a Ted McMillan. Definitely taking him over like Tyler Warren, where the hit rates at tight end, they're just pretty sketchy, and he's certainly not a flawless prospect. Same thing with some of these running backs where the draft capital is uncertain. Also just not a huge Quinshon Judkins guy. So JSN I think is fun. And then same thing with Marvin Harrison Jr. Even though we kind of had an underwhelming rookie season, he still went for nearly 900 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns. Like, it was underwhelming because the expectations were so high and because he was such an elite prospect. But I think in this class, maybe Travis Hunter, but like with the uncertainty of Hunter playing corner, like I still would view him as the wide receiver 1 in this class. I'm taking him over McMillan. I'm easily taking him over like Burden, Egbuka moving forward. And so I'm fine like taking the discount after a not so great rookie year. I think maybe the Marvin Harrison Jr. owner could be looking at the pick they spent last year, and they spent maybe the 102, 103 to get Marv. He was kind of underwhelming. They might be thinking they could re-roll this year with the 104. I just think the quality of these draft classes are very, very different. Where like last year, you were getting like Drake May in like the 105, 106 area. Like this year, he'd be the number 1 pick easy, and, he'd probably be in discussion with Ashton Genty. So it's just very different classes, especially in terms of like the top end talent. And so for the 104, I would definitely take Marvin Harrison Jr. Now looking at the 105, we have a couple more wide receivers here. I think Garrett Wilson and T. Higgins are interesting targets. For Garrett Wilson, he's just had some really awful situations so far in his career, and it's not exactly looking great moving forward, right? Like, seems like Fields is probably more of like a bridge situation here, and then they're going to have to figure it out at some point. But we know the talent is there for Garrett Wilson. He was a mid-tier wide receiver 3 for fantasy in year 1 and year 2. He was the wide receiver 18 in points per game last year. Once he finally got like competent quarterback play, he's gone for at least 1,000 yards in all 3 of his seasons, and he's still very young at 24 years old. So there's still time for them to get this quarterback situation figured out. We know the talent is there for Garrett Wilson. I like him here for the 105. And then for T. Higgins, a little bit older, 26 years old, but the dude was the wide receiver 5 in points per game last year. He re-upped with Cincinnati. I think he's going to be a fantasy wide receiver 1, maybe more of like a back-end wide receiver 1 moving forward, but I still think he's just a really solid option who should be giving you, potential wide receiver 1 production for the next 3-4 seasons. And for the 105, I would definitely take that. Now, looking at the 106, this is where we're getting into some, potential new targets. I think Travis Hunter kind of enters the mix as an interesting play. And before I talk about the specific targets, I do just kind of want to talk about like this general range from like the 106 to like the 109, 110 area. I think this is where you're going to have like Travis Hunter potentially going in these rookie drafts. And I think he's just such a polarizing player where if you are someone who, like me, is like very high on Travis Hunter and you really believe in the ceiling and you're willing to take on the risk, like maybe you're not trying to move off of him in this spot, right? Like if you think you can get Travis Hunter the 108, 109, then maybe you don't want to move the pick. I think when we're looking at the overall upside of this class, I think Travis Hunter probably has the highest ceiling because I think you look at Genty, right? And you have guys like Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, like they smashed in year 2, like they did what they were supposed to do. And they're like, fringe round 1 startup picks where they're going like pick 12, pick 13 in that area. A guy like Cam Ward, I just don't think he has the rushing upside, where even if he hits, I don't think he's going to be a top 12 dynasty asset. And then like some of these other running backs, I just don't think they're reaching that peak. A guy like Travis Hunter, where if he's playing wide receiver, playing minimally on defense, I do think he has the upside at the wide receiver position to be a locked-in top 12 dynasty asset. Now, that's obviously like him hitting his peak. When we're talking about overall upside, I do think it's there for Travis Hunter. So if you're very in on him, I could see not wanting to move these picks. But looking at the targets here at the 106, I'd be looking at J.J. McCarthy and Breece Hall. I think McCarthy is a really interesting kind of target here because when you compare him to a guy like Cam Ward, it's very possible that if J.J. McCarthy was in this year's class, he would be the number 1 pick in the draft. And so I think a lot of people are going to have Cam Ward as like the 102, 103, 104, somewhere in there. And I get it, right? Like a quarterback going first in the draft is a big deal. The team's going to be committed to them long term. But then I think you compare it to a guy like J.J. McCarthy, and it's like you could get McCarthy, who could be the quarterback 1 in this class, and he's not going to have the number 1 pick draft capital, but his situation is infinitely better with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. And so it's like if I can trade my 106 for McCarthy and Cam Ward's going to be drafted top 5, like I feel like I'm coming out ahead in that situation. And then on the other side for Breece Hall, I think maybe this would seem like, way too much to get back for the 106, but it kind of seems like people are sketched out on him a little bit. I'm willing to buy the dip. There are, potential concerns about a committee with Aaron Glenn coming in from Detroit. There have even been some trade rumors about them potentially moving off of him. And he's also coming off a disappointing 2024. So there's enough smoke there that I think the Breece Hall, owner could potentially be concerned, especially if they're thinking here at the 106, like maybe they like Quinshon Judkins. They think he could be the pick here. Maybe they like a tight end in a guy like Tyler Warren. They might be interested in moving off a guy like Breece Hall. And I'm just not going to fade off of someone who was like a 20-plus point per game guy, once fully cleared, the year removed from the torn ACL. He's shown that he can handle a large workload. He has legit receiving upside. And I also think it's possible that like a trade could be a huge W for him just in terms of like turning around his situation. So McCarthy, Breece Hall would be my targets there. Then look at the 107. This is like when we're adding potentially Egbuka to the mix. Obviously, some people could have different targets. You could be, adding a Luther Burden, guys like that. But my potential trade target would be Xavier Worthy. He was a back-end round 1 rookie pick last year. Had a fine rookie season, was the wide receiver 40 in points per game, but he really started to put it together towards the end of the year. 19 plus PPR points in 5 of his last 6 games. That's including the playoff run. And he's still very young. Hasn't even turned 22 years old yet. He's attached to Mahomes for the long haul. And I think for Worthy, he might never be like a locked-in fantasy wide receiver 1, but I do think he's going to be someone who's producing, on a consistent basis year after year. The talent's there as a, very young player attached to Patrick Mahomes. And this is kind of when you're getting into the range of like drafting in a Emeka Egbuka, who doesn't seem like the highest ceiling player. So you kind of know what you're getting out of Xavier Worthy. Like I did mention earlier, like if I thought I could get Travis Hunter here, I'm probably taking Hunter over Xavier Worthy, but I know I'm probably going to be higher on him than consensus. And then for the 108, I'm looking at guys like Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore. For CMC, I know he's very polarizing. There are obvious injury concerns, but the ceiling is undoubtedly there, where in 4 of his last 7 seasons, the healthy ones, he has been a top 2 running back in points per game. He is 28 years old, so he's getting up there, but I feel like he has a ceiling in 2025 that like every pick in this area, aside from Travis Hunter, probably won't be able to touch in their careers. Like Tyler Warren, he could be a higher end tight end one, but is he going to be a true league winner like a CMC? Is Judkins ever going to be like a top 5 running back in points per game? Is Egbuka ever going to be a locked in wide receiver one, a top 5 option? I'd probably bet against that. For Christian McCaffrey, though, if the health holds up, he could be a league winner for the next, 1, 2, 3, 4 seasons if the health holds up. And then for DJ Moore, is kind of on the older end also, 28 years old, but he has a top 10 season under his belt within the last 2 seasons. Seems like things are really going to turn around offensively. Ben Johnson coming in. Would expect a big leap from Caleb Williams here, just with the coaching turnover, him heading into his second season. And so I think DJ Moore just provides some upside at wide receiver where he could be a top 12 guy in 2025. And you just don't know if you're going to be getting that out of a guy like Egbuka or some of the other guys going in this range. Now, looking at the 109, got some wide receivers here, Chris Olave and Jordan Addison. For Olave, he's obviously here kind of this low just because of his concussion injury concerns. Production-wise, like this would be an absolute steal. If he just stays healthy, never has another concussion, like you're taking this, to the bank all day. As a rookie, he was the wide receiver 25 in points per game in a terrible situation. In year 2, he was the wide receiver 19 in points per game in a terrible situation. And then for Jordan Addison, he's just a proven NFL hit. He's been the wide receiver 30 and wide receiver 22 in fantasy points per game. He does kind of have a capped ceiling playing behind a guy like Justin Jefferson, but I think he's going to be a very solid fringe wide receiver 2 for a long time, 23 years old. If you can just get that nice like fringe wide receiver 2 option, just lock down the proven hit, you don't want to deal with the volatility of a rookie pick, he could be your guy in this range. And then I kind of have one target for like the 110 to 112 area, and that is a Jalen Waddle. And I think Waddle's overall dynasty value is just very interesting because a calendar year from now, like you would have had to trade probably your 102 in this year's class to get Jalen Waddle. Not the 102 last year, but looking at what the 102 is going to be this year, like that's probably what you would have had to give up to get a guy like Jalen Waddle. But then after an awful 2024 where he's the wide receiver 50 in points per game, he's, really kind of tanked in his dynasty value. But you can't ignore his first 3 seasons where he was the wide receiver 15, the wide receiver 12, and the wide receiver 21. You also have these Tyreek Hill, potential trade rumors where like if Hill gets traded and they're not bringing in another top weapon, Jalen Waddle could step in and be their clear-cut wide receiver 1. And all of a sudden, he is booming in value as I think like a 26-year-old who's now potentially a wide receiver 1 for fantasy. So I think in that back end round 1 range, Jalen Waddle is a very interesting option, especially once you're getting into like, Shadur Sanders. I do like Colston Loveland probably more than consensus, but like your Luther Burdens, Caleb Johnson, Matthew Golden, like I'm probably taking Waddle over the vast majority of those guys. So that's going to wrap it up for some potential trade targets. I will say if you're holding a rookie pick, look at some of the names you'd be in range of drafting here. If you kind of like that crop, then maybe you want to stay put. You don't want to move, for some of these dudes. But if you're not a huge fan of the overall players going in your range, I do think these are some interesting guys you could look to target. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. Thank you all for stopping by. Hit that like button, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.